Commander Zixthala had seen warfare across 17 different star systems. The Kethmori species had been observing galactic conflicts for over 3 millennia, documenting battle strategies and combat effectiveness across hundreds of civilized worlds. They considered themselves the ultimate military analysts, their crystalline minds capable of processing tactical data faster than any organic brain. Nothing in the cosmos could surprise them anymore, until they encountered Earth. The observation vessel, Silent Watcher, hung in the dark space beyond the outer rim of the Sol system, its cloaking fields making it invisible to the primitive detection systems of the third planet. The crew had been monitoring this backwater world for 6 standard cycles, initially drawn by the unusual electromagnetic signatures emanating from what the locals called Earth. "Commander," chirped Science Officer Velnara through the ship's neural link, "the humans are engaging in another territorial conflict. Sector designation. Afghanistan, I believe they call it." Zixthala's 4 eyes rotated independently as she accessed the data stream. The Kethmori had been puzzled by these creatures since first contact protocols began. Humans were physically unremarkable, soft-skinned, slow-moving, lacking natural armor or weapons. Their technology was laughably primitive compared to even the most basic galactic civilizations. Yet something about them had triggered the Council of Observers' interest. "Display the engagement zone," Zixthala commanded. The holographic projector materialized a 3-dimensional map of the mountainous region. Red dots indicated human military units, while blue represented what the humans called insurgents, or terrorists. The tactical display showed a small outpost surrounded by hostile forces. "Initial assessment suggests the humans are heavily outnumbered," reported tactical analyst Morden. 17 humans against approximately 200 hostiles. Standard galactic military doctrine would recommend immediate evacuation. Zixthala studied the data. "What are the humans doing?" "They appear to be staying," Velnara said with confusion bleeding through the neural link. "No evacuation protocols initiated, no surrender broadcast detected." The commander focused her attention on the real-time feed. The human outpost was little more than sandbags and crude barriers, primitive even by pre-spaceflight standards. The humans inside moved with purpose, their organic faces showing what the Kethmori database identified as determination. "Begin detailed behavioral recording," Zixthala ordered. "Something is not standard here." What followed challenged everything the Kethmori understood about rational military behavior. The first wave of attackers approached under cover of darkness. The humans waited silently, their primitive optical equipment barely adequate for night operations. Any civilized species would have used this disadvantage as justification for retreat. Instead, the humans did something unexpected. They let the enemy get close, dangerously close. "Why are they not engaging?" Morden asked. "The attackers are well within weapons range." Then it happened. The humans opened fire simultaneously, their chemical projectile weapons creating a devastating crossfire that eliminated the first wave almost instantly. The precision was remarkable, each human targeting multiple enemies with deadly accuracy. "Fascinating," Zixthala murmured. "They used their defensive position to create a killing field. They sacrificed the advantage of range for maximum lethality." But the analysis was just beginning. The second wave approached differently, spreading out and using cover. Standard tactics that should have overwhelmed 17 defenders. The humans adapted instantly. Some provided covering fire while others moved to new positions, appearing to communicate through subtle gestures rather than their primitive radio equipment. "Commander," Velnara's voice carried disturbed undertones, "I'm detecting unusual physiological readings from the humans." "Explain." "Their stress hormones are elevated, but not in patterns consistent with fear or panic. Their heart rates are increased, but their movements remain precise and coordinated. It's as if the combat situation is enhancing rather than degrading their performance. Zixthala had never encountered such data. Every known species showed decreased efficiency under extreme stress. Combat was typically a desperate last resort, something to be avoided or ended quickly. These humans seemed to be thriving in it. The battle continued for hours. Waves of attackers fell back, regrouped, and attacked again. The humans held their position with tactics that defied logic. When ammunition ran low, they scavenged from fallen enemies. When defensive positions were compromised, they fell back to secondary positions they had apparently prepared in advance. Most disturbing of all, they never seemed to consider surrender. "Request immediate analysis," Zixthala commanded her staff. "Why are these humans fighting to the death for what appears to be strategically worthless terrain?" The data analysis took several minutes. When it returned, it painted a picture that chilled even the logical Keth Mori. "The outpost serves no significant military purpose," reported strategic analyst Klexara. "It contains no valuable resources, no strategic choke points, no civilian populations. By all rational measures, it should be abandoned." "Then why?" "Because," Klexara continued, "abandoning it would allow enemy forces to claim a symbolic victory. The humans appear to be fighting for principle." The concept was foreign to Keth Mori thinking. Territory was valuable for resources, strategic position, or population centers. Fighting for abstract concepts seemed wasteful, illogical. As dawn approached, only 8 humans remained alive in the outpost. They had expended most of their ammunition and suffered multiple casualties. Any rational species would surrender, negotiate, or attempt escape. Instead, they prepared for a final stand. "I don't understand their behavior," Velnara admitted. "Their situation is hopeless. Death is certain. Yet their stress hormones show acceptance, resolve." The final assault came with overwhelming force. The remaining humans fought until their weapons ceased firing, then continued with crude hand-to-hand combat tools. Even when mortally wounded, they continued fighting until the moment of death. When it was over, the attackers had claimed the outpost, but at a cost of nearly 150 casualties. 17 humans had inflicted nearly 10-to-1 losses against a numerically superior enemy using superior tactics and local knowledge. The battle aftermath provided even more disturbing insights. Intercepted communications revealed that the human command structure had known the outpost was indefensible. They had expected total casualties. The 17 humans had volunteered, knowing they would die. "This makes no sense," Morden stated flatly. "They threw away lives for no strategic gain." But Zixthala was beginning to understand something far more troubling. The battle hadn't been about the outpost at all. It had been about sending a message. The massive casualties inflicted had forced the enemy to reconsider future attacks. Other human positions would now seem more dangerous, more costly to assault. 17 humans had died to make their enemies fear attacking 18 different locations. "Begin deep psychological profiling," Zixthala ordered. "I want to understand these creatures." Over the following cycles, the Silent Watcher monitored dozens of human conflicts. The pattern repeated consistently. Humans would fight far longer than any rational species, often achieving impossible victories through sheer refusal to surrender. When defeat was inevitable, they would ensure maximum cost to their enemies. More disturbing still were the historical records they accessed. Humans had been fighting like this for millennia. Their entire civilization seemed built on the principle that some things were worth dying for, even when survival was impossible. "Commander," Velnara reported one day, "I've completed analysis of human military doctrine across their recorded history. The findings are unsettling." "Report." "They have a term, Pyrrhic victory. It refers to winning at such a cost that the victory is meaningless. Most species would consider this a failure of leadership. Humans actively plan for it. They have entire strategic doctrines based on making their enemy's victories so costly that the enemy abandons further attacks. Zixthala felt something she had never experienced before: unease. The Kethmori had always assumed that intelligence naturally led to rational self-preservation. These humans seemed to operate on entirely different principles. "There's more," Velnara continued. "Their historical records show consistent patterns of small forces defeating much larger ones through tactics that prioritize enemy casualties over survival. They call it making them pay for every inch." The implications were staggering: an entire species that fought not just to win, but to ensure that victory against them was too costly to contemplate. Every human military engagement was simultaneously a battle and a warning to future enemies. What manner of evolution produces such creatures? Morden wondered. The question would haunt them for cycles to come. As they prepared to move to a new observation zone, Zixthala realized they had only begun to understand the dark truth about humanity's approach to warfare. These creatures didn't just fight battles, they fought wars across generations, using psychological tactics that outlasted individual conflicts. Every human death in combat was simultaneously an end and a beginning, the end of one defender, and the beginning of a legend that would inspire others to fight even harder. The humans, it seemed, had weaponized the observation post on the edge of the Tau Ceti system, had become a place of growing dread for the Kethmori research team. 3 months had passed since their initial encounter with human warfare, and Commander Zixthala found herself questioning fundamental assumptions about intelligent life. The Silent Watcher now monitored a different kind of conflict. Human forces had engaged an alien species called the Zeltar in what humans termed first contact. The Zeltar were a logical choice for initial galactic warfare, technologically superior to humans, but operating under conventional military doctrine. The Kethmori expected to document humanity's swift defeat and file a routine report on primitive species encountering spacefaring civilizations. They were not prepared for what they witnessed. "The Zeltar have established orbital superiority," reported tactical analyst Morden. "Their plasma weaponry is approximately 400 years more advanced than human technology. Standard projections indicate human defeat within 72 hours. Science Officer Velnara's crystalline form flickered with confused energy patterns. Yet the humans have not attempted surrender or negotiation. Their communication networks show no signs of panic or despair." Zixthala studied the tactical displays with growing fascination and horror. The humans had done something unprecedented in galactic military history. When faced with technologically superior enemies, instead of seeking advantageous terms for surrender, they had deliberately scattered their forces. "Explain their deployment pattern," she commanded. "It appears to be random," Morden admitted. "Small human units are spread across 17 different continents. No centralized command structure, no obvious strategic objectives. By conventional analysis, they have made themselves easier to defeat by preventing coordinated resistance. But Zixthala was beginning to suspect that human warfare operated on principles alien to conventional thinking. She ordered continuous monitoring of all human units simultaneously. The pattern that emerged over the following days challenged every military doctrine in the galactic database. The Zeltar, following logical conquest protocols, began systematically destroying human military installations. Each victory was swift and decisive, their superior technology making human resistance seemingly futile. But instead of demoralizing human forces, each defeat triggered something unprecedented. "Commander," Velnara's voice carried disturbed undertones, "you need to observe this immediately." The holographic display showed a Zeltar ground force that had just destroyed a human military base. Standard procedure would be to secure the area and move to the next objective. Instead, They found themselves under constant harassment from human units that appeared out of nowhere, struck quickly, and vanished before retaliation was possible. The humans are not attempting to reclaim lost territory, Zixthala observed. They're making it impossible for the Zeltar to consolidate their gains. It's worse than that, reported intelligence specialist Nixandra. Analysis of human communications reveals they're deliberately avoiding decisive engagements. They're fighting a war of attrition against a technologically superior enemy. The concept was incomprehensible to Keth Mori thinking. Attrition warfare against superior forces was suicide. Yet the humans seemed to be implementing it systematically. How are they maintaining morale when they're losing every major engagement? Morton asked. The answer, when it came, revealed the true horror of human military psychology. The humans weren't measuring victory by territory held or battles won. They were counting enemy casualties versus time invested. Every day they could force the Zeltar to maintain occupation forces was a victory. Every Zeltar soldier killed by improvised human attacks was a success. Every piece of Zeltar equipment destroyed was worth more than human lives lost. Display casualty ratios, Zixthala ordered. The data made her 4 eyes dilate in shock. Despite losing every major battle, the humans were achieving nearly 1-to-1 casualty exchange rates against a vastly superior enemy. In conventional warfare, technological advantage should have created 10-to-1 or 20-to-1 ratios in favor of the Zeltar. How is this possible? She whispered. Velnara's analysis provided disturbing answers. The humans have adapted their tactics to neutralize Zeltar technological advantages. They engage only at close range where Zeltar plasma weapons cannot be used without risking collateral damage to Zeltar forces. They fight primarily in civilian areas where orbital bombardment would violate Zeltar ethical codes. They've weaponized the enemy's own moral constraints. But the true revelation came when the Keth Mori began monitoring human internal communications more closely. What they discovered defied every assumption about rational behavior. The humans were not just accepting casualties, they were planning for them. Military units had contingency plans that assumed 90% casualty rates. Soldiers recorded farewell messages to be delivered after their deaths. Medical facilities were designed around the assumption that wounded would not evacuate but continue fighting until death. This is impossible, Morden stated flatly. No species can maintain military effectiveness while expecting total casualties. Yet the humans were doing exactly that. More disturbing still, their effectiveness seemed to increase as casualties mounted. Surviving units fought harder, not from desperation, but from what human communications termed honoring the fallen. The Zeltar, meanwhile, were becoming demoralized despite their tactical victories. Occupation duty that should have been routine had become a nightmare of constant alerts, casualties from hidden explosives, and attacks by humans who appeared to have no regard for their own survival. Analyze Zeltar communication patterns, Zixthala ordered. The results painted a picture that would have been comedic if it weren't so terrifying. The technologically superior Zeltar were beginning to fear their primitive enemies, not because humans could defeat them in direct combat, but because humans seemed incapable of accepting defeat. Zeltar commanders were requesting reinforcements not to achieve victory, but to maintain sanity among troops who never knew when the next suicidal human attack would come. Zeltar soldiers were developing psychological disorders from fighting enemies who seemed to welcome death if it meant killing one more invader. The humans have turned their own mortality into a weapon, Velnara observed with something approaching awe and terror. Every human death makes the survivors more dangerous, not less. The tactical implications were staggering. Human military doctrine wasn't designed to win wars in the traditional sense. It was designed to make the cost of victory so psychologically devastating that enemies would choose not to fight future wars against humanity. Days passed, and the pattern intensified. Zeltar forces controlled all strategic positions on Earth, but found themselves trapped in an endless cycle of small unit actions against enemies who fought like cornered predators. Every building cleared had to be cleared again days later. Every road secured became dangerous again as soon as patrols moved on. The humans had turned their entire planet into a weapon designed to destroy enemy morale. "I'm detecting unusual Zeltar communication patterns," Nixandra reported. "They appear to be reconsidering their invasion." "Impossible. They have achieved total strategic victory." "Tactical victory, Commander. But they're discovering that defeating humans and controlling human territory are entirely different challenges." The intercepted Zeltar communications revealed military commanders requesting permission to use orbital bombardment to sterilize human population centers. When their high command refused on ethical grounds, field commanders began reporting that the invasion had become unsustainable. Fighting humans wasn't just costly in terms of casualties. It was psychologically damaging to civilized soldiers who had never encountered enemies who seemed to prefer death to surrender. "The Zeltar are beginning to withdraw selected forces," Morden reported in disbelief. "They're abandoning territory they conquered at great cost because they cannot maintain control without constant combat." Zixthala realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic military history. A primitive species was defeating a technologically superior enemy not through superior strategy or weapons, but by being psychologically impossible to defeat. The humans had weaponized hopelessness itself. "Commander," Velnara's voice carried new urgency, "we're receiving communications from other Kethmori observation posts throughout this sector." "Report?" "Multiple species are requesting information about human military capabilities. Word of this conflict is spreading. Several civilizations are concerned." The implications hit Zixthala like a kinetic weapon. News of humanity's approach to warfare was spreading through galactic civilization. Species that had never heard of Earth were suddenly very interested in understanding how 17 humans could hold an outpost against 200 attackers, or how an entire planet could make victory Pyrrhic even when completely conquered. What manner of civilization produces such warriors? She wondered aloud. The answer was beginning to emerge from their cultural analysis. Humans didn't separate civilian and military thinking. Every human seemed capable of the same suicidal determination they had observed in trained soldiers. Their entire species was psychologically prepared for warfare that other civilizations could only endure for short periods. "There's something else," Velnara continued. "I've been analyzing human entertainment media, their historical records, their cultural mythology. Commander, they glorify this behavior. Stories of impossible last stands, heroic sacrifices, and Pyrrhic victories are central to their cultural identity." The revelation was terrifying. This wasn't aberrant behavior by extremist military units. This was normal for humans. They raised their children on stories of heroes who died fighting impossible odds. They celebrated defeats that cost enemies dearly more than victories that came cheaply. "We need to understand why," Zixthala decided. "Begin deep analysis of human evolutionary history. Something created these creatures and we need to know what." As the Zeltar withdrawal began in earnest, abandoning a planet they had conquered but could not hold, the Kethmori prepared for the most disturbing phase of their research yet. Understanding not just how humans fought, but why an entire species had evolved to find meaning in hopeless resistance. The answers they would find would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about the nature of intelligent life. Airy concept of martyrdom. 6 months of research had transformed the crew of the Silent Watcher from confident military analysts into deeply disturbed observers of something that challenged their understanding of natural law itself. Commander Zixathala stood before the massive holographic display showing Earth's evolutionary timeline, her 4 eyes processing data that painted a picture so horrifying she almost wished they had never discovered this species. "Begin final report summary," she commanded, though part of her dreaded what they had learned. Science Officer Velnara's crystalline form pulsed with unstable energy patterns as she accessed the compiled data. "Commander, our analysis of human evolutionary history has revealed why they fight the way they do. The answer is unprecedented in galactic biological records." The holographic display shifted to show Earth's surface as it existed millions of years ago. What the Kethmori saw challenged every assumption about how intelligence developed in the cosmos. Most sapient species evolved on worlds with abundant resources and minimal predation pressure, Velnara began. Intelligence developed as a tool for resource management, social cooperation, and environmental adaptation. Warfare, when it occurred, was typically brief and decisive. Earth was different, strategic analyst Klexera added, her voice carrying undertones of disbelief. Humanity evolved in an environment where literally everything was trying to kill them. The evolutionary timeline revealed a planet that should have been incapable of producing intelligence. Earth teemed with predators, natural disasters, climate changes, and resource scarcity that would have driven most species to extinction. Instead of developing intelligence for cooperation and plenty, humans had developed it for survival against impossible odds. "They are not warriors who learn to think," Zixathala realized with growing horror. "They are thinkers who evolved from warriors." "It's worse than that," reported xenopsychologist Morthek, who had joined the research team specifically to understand human mental patterns. "Human brain development required constant stress responses to function optimally. What we interpret as aberrant combat behavior is actually their natural cognitive state." The implications were staggering. Every other known intelligent species had evolved past their primitive survival instincts. Humans had weaponized theirs. "Show me the neurochemical analysis," Zixathala ordered. The data that appeared made her wish she could unsee it. Human brains under combat stress didn't just maintain function, they enhanced it. The same chemicals that paralyzed other species with fear made humans faster, stronger, and more capable of complex tactical thinking. "They are literally addicted to warfare," Morthek explained. "Their neurochemistry rewards behaviors that would be considered pathological in any other species. Risk-taking, self-sacrifice, and prolonged combat stress all trigger positive feedback loops in human brain chemistry." "That explains individual behavior," tactical analyst Morden interjected. "But not their collective military doctrine. Why do they coordinate these suicidal tactics?" The answer came from cultural analyst Nix Andra, whose research into human social structures had revealed something even more disturbing than their individual psychology. "Because they don't see death as the end of their contribution to warfare," she said quietly. "Human military doctrine is based on the concept of legacy." The holographic display shifted to show human historical records, battle monuments, and cultural rituals surrounding military death. What the Kethmori observed was a species that had turned martyrdom into science. "Every human death in combat serves multiple purposes," Nix Andra continued. "Immediate tactical value through inflicting casualties, medium-term strategic value through psychological impact on enemies, long-term cultural value through inspiring future generations to fight harder." "They fight wars across centuries," Zixathala whispered, finally understanding the true scope of human military thinking. Human warfare wasn't contained to individual conflicts. It was a continuous process where every battle, every death, every act of resistance fed into a larger pattern designed to ensure species survival through making the cost of attacking humanity psychologically unbearable. "Display the deep cultural analysis," she commanded. What appeared was the most terrifying revelation yet. Human civilization wasn't built around avoiding conflict. It was designed to thrive during it. Their greatest cultural achievements, their most celebrated heroes, their foundational myths all centered around individuals and groups who had fought hopeless battles against overwhelming odds. "They worship failure," Velnara said in amazement, "as long as the failure costs their enemies dearly." "Not worship," Mortek corrected grimly. "They've weaponized it. Every human child grows up hearing stories of glorious last stands, heroic sacrifices, and Pyrrhic victories. They're psychologically programmed from birth to see dying for their species as the highest possible achievement. The cultural programming was so thorough that humans seemed incapable of recognizing when they had been truly defeated. Every loss became a lesson for future victories. Every death became inspiration for future fighters. Every defeat became a recruiting tool for the next war. "How many species have encountered humans in direct conflict?" Zixthala asked. 17 documented cases, Nixandra replied. "The results are consistent." The tactical display showed the outcomes of human conflicts with various galactic civilizations. The pattern was identical in every case. Human forces lost every major engagement while inflicting casualty ratios that made victory meaningless for their enemies. More disturbing still, species that had defeated humans once universally avoided future conflicts with them. Word had spread through galactic civilization that fighting humans was possible but too costly to justify, except in the most extreme circumstances. "They've achieved strategic dominance without winning a single major war," Morden observed in disbelief. "Because they redefined what victory means," Zixthala replied, her understanding finally complete. The humans hadn't just developed unusual military tactics. They had created a form of warfare that made the traditional concept of victory obsolete. When fighting humans meant accepting massive casualties, regardless of technological superiority, most rational species chose not to fight at all. "There's one more element," Velnara added reluctantly, "the psychological impact on enemy populations." The analysis of post-conflict societies showed that civilizations which had fought humans suffered long-term psychological effects. Soldiers developed disorders from fighting enemies who seemed to welcome death. Civilian populations experienced persistent anxiety about the possibility of future human conflicts. Military leaders struggled with strategic planning against opponents who didn't follow rational decision-making patterns. "Fighting humans doesn't just cost lives and resources," Mortek summarized. "It damages the psychological foundation of civilized society." The full picture was now clear, and it terrified them. Humanity represented something unprecedented in galactic evolution, a sapient species that had developed intelligence not to transcend their violent origins, but to perfect them. "Recommendation?" Zixthala asked her staff. "Immediate classification as a Category Omega civilization," Klexara replied without hesitation. "Not due to technological capability, but due to psychological warfare potential that exceeds anything in our database." "Agreed. But there's something else we need to address." Zixthala activated the communication array connecting them to the Kethemori High Council. The response was immediate, indicating that word of their research had already reached the highest levels of galactic civilization. "Commander Zixthala," came the resonant voice of Prime Counselor Thexmora, "your preliminary reports have caused significant concern among multiple civilizations. The Galactic Defense Council has requested immediate clarification on human threat assessment. Prime Counselor, humans represent a form of warfare that existing galactic military doctrine cannot counter. They have weaponized the concept of unacceptable cost to achieve strategic objectives without technological superiority. Explain the implications for galactic security." Zixthala gathered her courage for what she knew would be the most important communication of her career. Sir, humanity cannot be defeated through conventional military action. They can only be contained through complete avoidance of conflict. Any species that chooses to fight humans will achieve tactical victory at the cost of strategic defeat. The communication channel remained silent for long moments before the Prime Counselor responded. Are you saying that a pre-spaceflight civilization has effectively immunized itself against galactic military conquest? Worse, sir. They've created a form of warfare that damages the psychological stability of any civilization that encounters it. Fighting humans doesn't just cost resources, it threatens the mental health of entire societies. Recommendation for containment protocols? Zixthala looked at her research team, seeing her own conclusions reflected in their analysis. Permanent quarantine zone around the Sol system, no direct contact under any circumstances. Classify human space as a psychological hazard area requiring special authorization for observation missions. Commander, you're suggesting that we treat a primitive species as more dangerous than technologically advanced hostile civilizations. Sir, technologically advanced civilizations can be defeated or negotiated with. Humans have created a form of warfare that makes victory meaningless and defeat traumatic. They are not more powerful than advanced civilizations. They are more dangerous. The distinction was crucial. Power could be countered with greater power, but psychological warfare that turned the very concept of military victory into a trap had no conventional counter. As the communication ended and the silent watcher prepared to establish the first quarantine boundary around human space, Zixthala realized they had witnessed something that would change galactic civilization forever. Humanity had achieved the ultimate military victory not by becoming strong enough to defeat their enemies, but by becoming too psychologically damaging to fight. In the depths of space, other observation vessels were already beginning their withdrawal from the edges of the Sol system, carrying reports that would ensure humanity remained alone among the stars, not from weakness, but from a form of strength too terrifying for civilized species to confront. The humans, still unaware of the galactic civilization watching them, continued their small wars and local conflicts, never realizing that their greatest victory had already been won. They had achieved what no other species in galactic history had managed. They had made themselves militarily untouchable, not through superior technology or numbers, but by being psychologically impossible to defeat. The galaxy had learned to fear not what humans could do, but what fighting them would do to everyone else.